The following presentation was recorded live for the International Association of Square Dance Callers 19th Annual Convention. We take you live to Virginia Beach, Virginia, where our session is just getting underway.
Program on showmanship, and we'll just get started right off here. I'd like to introduce our two panelists. The first one that's going to speak to us is from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. He does a weekly mainstream group, an A2 group, a C1 introduction to C2 group. He's been calling for 18 years, and I hate people like this. He owns his own insurance company, owns his own airplane, flies around. He's been affiliated with CALLERLAB for 10 years. How about a nice welcome from Mr. Tim Crawford? And yesterday we were talking out in the hall, and this next young lady told us where she was from. Tim says, "No, there's no such place." This young lady currently has an A1 class. She just finished a plus class, and in her particular part of the country, they don't have that many club callers per se. The callers rotate around the various clubs. She travels a lot through Southern California and the surrounding area. She's been calling for 10 years, affiliated with CALLERLAB for 7 years. From Rancho Cucamonga, California, Miss Deborah Parnell. I'm Darryl McMillan from Lynn Haven, Florida, and we do appreciate you coming into the session this morning. I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Tim Crawford. He's going to talk to you for a few minutes. Toward the end of the session, we will have a question and answer type thing for anybody who'd like to have some questions. Tim, come right here. Tim Crawford.
Well, thank you and good morning. I just was wondering if you all got this little paper here. You all were at a session just a little bit earlier today. I wondered if any of you got to the session over in the back bay at 9 o'clock. It was on for the female callers. It says female callers equipment. I want to know what that was like. Did anybody go to that? Was that good? Sandra, were you there, Sandra? What was that like? I got to tell you how this happened to me. I got a letter that came to me in the mail from the head office, and they asked me if I'd be interested in looking at doing a seminar in showmanship. So I said that I thought that would be okay. And of course, somebody who's 170 pounds and 5 foot 9 inches does not say no to George White. So I said I would do it. And I thought about it for a long time. I spent a lot of time thinking about what is showmanship. So showmanship is a title for something. It means something. It's something that we use or something that we do that just differentiates us from somebody else. It's called showmanship. So that's great. So we all have this showmanship thing that I said. It still has to be defined as something. It has to be something. And it must be something singular because it's showmanship, not showmanships. So it had to be something singular. So I spent 3 months or better looking for something that I could define as showmanship. And I thought, well, maybe it's something I can go out and get. So I looked around to see if I could go out and get something called showmanship. It's impossible to buy. It's impossible to steal. You can't take it. It's not tangible. It's something that we already have. I looked in the mirror one day and I looked at myself, and after I got over the initial fright, I said to myself that I already have it. I already have showmanship. So then I said, okay, if I have showmanship, I obviously didn't know that I had showmanship, so there must be something that I must be doing then to be a showman. And I thought, well, because we're all callers and we all have egos and showmanship must be directly attached to our egos, then we must, in fact, be looking at something that accentuates our showmanship. So I thought, well, actually, moreover, we as callers tend to use the things that work very well for us. So it's more like show-offmanship. We do. When we get on the stage, we grab our microphone. First thing, we go to our record case and we pull out a record that we like, that we do. I mean, nobody here grabs a record that we don't like. So it's show-offmanship. And one of the things that we use a vehicle to help us accentuate our show-offmanship. There's all kinds of, I call these things tools, and that's really what I want to speak about, is the tools that we use in showmanship. One of the things that, I have a whole list of things right here that are tools, and I'll just read some of them off and then I'll touch on a few of them. One of the tools that we can use is delivery, material, gimmicks, music, style, appearance, atmosphere, reputation, knowledge, compensation, program, humor, choreography, music, delivery style, business, our dialogue, our sex, our physical build, the volume, our current taxable status. No, that's wrong. Our marital status, and, of course, our age.
Watch it. Watch it. Why did he look over here at me when he said that, do you suppose?
So anyways, when I talked about the tools and everything, I thought, okay, what is a tool then? What actually is a tool that we have to look at for showmanship? And Black & Decker makes a bunch of tools, but that's not really what we're talking about. Caterpillar makes large tools, and that's not what we're talking about. Tools are something that we say or something that we do, or a series of things that we say or that we do that we put together in order to entertain the people that we're calling for. And we are calling for them. We're not calling for ourselves. Although the part of our showmanship has to be within ourselves, we have to be able to entertain ourselves as well. Otherwise, basically, we're going to be standing on the stage doing the same thing as a preconceived computer could do it. A computer-generated videotape can do it. We don't want to be like that. We want to be different. Anything can be a tool, anything at all. The idea is to identify the tools that work for you and then to use them effectively. Now, that's probably the single largest problem we have, is to take a tool and use it effectively, because some of these tools that we use, some of the things that work well for us, A, we may not know what they are, and B, we may not be using them effectively. If we use them too much, it's overkill. Overkill then ends up working in reverse for you, and people think that you're not a showman at all, except that you're just a show-off. And that's something, there's a very, very fine line in there. And occasionally, I must be honest with you, that I have fallen into a show-off category when I should have been into just a showman category. But it's difficult to differentiate where that line is, too, because for different people, it operates at a different spot as well. Any tool that you can choose can be very damaging to you, very damaging. Even something as simple as my age, for example. I started calling when I was 10 years old, and I grew up, so perhaps I have a little better insight as to the growing process and learning about how these things work for you, because every year that I grew, especially in my teens, it changed for me, because I was calling to adults all the time, and I had to be able to be an adult in front of these people, even though I was just a kid. I'd much rather have been out playing basketball, baseball, chasing girls, or whatever. Instead, I was at a square dance, calling square dances, which was equally as fun for me, but I had to be careful about how I approached it. I couldn't do childish and immature things. I do them now, which is kind of ironic, but I couldn't do them back then. So it was because I was afraid that I would end up with some sort of a stigma attached, that I would be a kid caller. And there's no way around that. I mean, I was a kid caller, and I enjoyed being a kid caller. And as I grew, I had to modify how I was and what I was doing, and everything changed. And I started wearing boots, and I started wearing the funny cut shirts and stuff. And that just wasn't me. I was a kid. And now I'm wearing other stuff again, stuff that kids would wear. There is something that all these tools that we use, all those things that I mentioned, I'm not really going to get too deep into these tools, other than to tell you that what you need to do is to step back from yourself and take a look at what you do. Have other people take a look at what you do. Have them identify the things that you do that entertain them. That's probably the most important thing, because what happens in a lot of cases is that you think that you're doing just perfect. You're doing wonderful. You think that you called a great dance, and what you did was really funny. You had the 4 girls working for 3/4 of an hour in the middle, and they thought that was hilarious. The dancers were laughing. And then you talk to somebody else who was actually dancing, and perhaps it wasn't. Because we really cannot be our own judges. We need outside people to be able to do that. The key is to find somebody who's objective. My parents were very objective as I was growing up. They were brutally objective, as a matter of fact. To this day, they're brutally objective. They don't come to very many of my dances anymore because I don't tell them where I'm calling. But I should tell you a funny story at this point. My father came to a dance with me when I was 15, 16 years old, because they had to drive me everywhere I went. And we went to a dance, and my father would come up at the end of the tip, and he would say, "You're too fast." So I'd slow it down. I'd say, "Thanks, Dad." And the next tip, he'd come in, and he goes, "We can't hear you at the back." I go, "Thanks, Dad. Thank you very much." And then he'd come up at the next tip, and he goes, "You were off key." And I went, "Dad, thank you. Thank you very much. I don't need any more help." And he was really put off by that, because I'd always said I always wanted to be honest with me. But I was getting older now and a little more cocky, and I thought, I knew what was good for me. So I said, "I don't need your help. Thank you very much. Go back and dance and be quiet." So he did. And then as the dance went on and everything, the machine started giving me trouble. The needle started skating across the record, and I was having a heck of a time. And after a while, I noticed that the turntable was sort of sitting on a tilt. And I thought, holy moly, there's something under the turntable. So I reached on the turntable. There's a little pile of little papers. And the first paper says you're too fast. Second paper says you're too slow. Third paper says you're too fast. But I appreciated that as I grew. As much as I did not want to hear it, it really made me better for who I am today. I attended a caller school. Probably a lot of you did at East Hill Farms with Earl Johnson and Al Brundage. And they had a whole session where I called it a rip and tear session, because they just ripped you apart. And, of course, that never happened to me. I was very lucky. But But they, no, I'm kidding. It did happen to me. But they were really nice because I was just a boy then. But they did tear some people. They actually told one of the fellows, sell your equipment. Do everybody a favor and sell your equipment and go back to dancing. And I thought, to be able to, I don't know whether they said that joking or not, but I was like 13, 14 years old, and I would have believed anything that they had said. So I felt really bad for this poor guy, but actually I think he did sell his equipment and stop calling. But the interesting thing was that they were not afraid to tell you exactly what they thought. And the key is to find somebody that you have who's going to tell you exactly what they thought about what you did. Because sometimes you can get carried away. And my father, he would always put me right in my place. I remember driving home from dances, my mother, who was a little bit quieter, would tell my father to be quiet because he spent an hour and a half telling me what I did wrong. And my mother would just turn around and say, you did fine, honey. And that made me happy. But you need somebody to be able to do that for you. There is something called controlled responses. Does anybody know what controlled responses are? Controlled responses is something that happens, is an expected response to the effective use of a tool, in our case. If you're using something and you know already what the response is going to be, it just opens an entire world for you to be able to put an entire show together. I jokingly, about when I'm on the road and I call all over the place, what I use is the Tim Crawford show. It varies a little bit, but basically I'm using certain singing calls in certain parts of the night because I already know what's going to happen with those singing calls. I know how the people are going to react, and I can vary it. I can take different paths or different avenues with the different types of singing calls, different types of choreography that I want to use, depending on the people, how I assess those people in the first couple of tips of the night. And those things, for me, are controlled responses. I know already what's going to happen with these singing calls. I put all those together in one night, and at the end of the evening, it was the Tim Crawford show. It wasn't a tip by tip by tip. It was a show. And I think that's important too. It's all part of the show, and you want to be able to put everything together so that the night either goes up and down for the people, or it just keeps climbing, or whatever you're decided what you want to do. The key is to have a controlled response. You have to know how the people are going to respond to what you offer them, and that comes with practice. And where you do that practicing, I guess, is entirely up to you. I do that practicing at my own clubs. And they're very forgiving in a lot of cases, very forgiving in a lot of cases. But I tell them that that's exactly what they're doing as well. The key is to, I guess, combine these controlled responses to make it look professional. The more professional you are, you can still have a lot of fun with people, but you have to be very professional in how you offer these things. Controlled responses are incredibly effective. I first learned about this from a speaker that we had at an insurance convention, as a matter of fact, in Ontario, and it was absolutely wonderful. And I applied it to square dancing, and I couldn't believe the difference in my night. The night went by like that. 2.5-hour dance went by in what seemed like 2 tips. It was more fun for me. It was more fun for the dancers. And at the end of it, I got booked back again, which was the biggest compliment that anybody can pay to a caller. I just want to let you know, just before I pass on, because I do a lot of talking, and sometimes it's really difficult for me to stop talking. So if I talk too much, just stop talking. I used to take medications to stop talking, but it didn't work. Actually, Damon Coe stopped me talking last night. Is he here? Anyways, it doesn't matter. One of the things that you have to remember about this is to identify those tools and use those tools. Know what the response of these things are going to be. Put them together in a night, and the night will go great for you. Let me just finish by telling you a little story about showmanship. We all want to do as best we can, and it's almost like a competition between us and the dancers or us and another caller. There's an elderly couple that just got married, and the first thing they did on their wedding night was go down to the hotel pool. And he slips in the water and swims 40 lengths in just under 2 hours. Crawls out of the water, he's huffing and puffing. His wife says, boy, that's pretty impressive for a man your age. He says, thank you. He says, swim team, All-American, 1936. He says, I won every race I ever entered. It was incredible. I was almost Olympic material. She says, that's amazing. And she slips in the water and swims 40 lengths in just less than half the time. She crawls out of the water huffing and puffing. He says, that's amazing. I have never seen anybody do anything like that in all my life. Where did you learn to do that? She says, University of Mississippi, 1936. Hooker, work both sides of the river. Showmanship is very important. Very important. Show-offmanship is important too. Show off what we do, because we do it better than the next guy. We are different from the next guy. As long as we keep on striving to do just a little bit different than somebody else, it comes off being professional, and it comes off being exactly what we're after, our show. And it really is a show that we're after.
Tim Crawford. Please make welcome Miss Deborah Parnell.
Oh, thank you, thank you. What Tim's focus was a little bit more of an overview of showmanship, and my focus is going to be more of a sharing as to what works for me. One of the things that would not work for me is a joke like he just told. I don't do that sort of thing. I will tell stories about myself, something that happened to me, but I'm very careful about the joke material. Did the blonde jokes, did that infection spread out to the East Coast? Well, that was great for me.
No, please tell us some.
Okay, all right. I will usually threaten if I can't get a square to get that last couple of, you don't square up and fill that, so I'm going to tell a joke. And it has to be, and of course it's now, the blonde jokes were they were great. Do you know what the blonde high five is? On the tape I just smacked myself on the forehead and then stuck my hand up in the air. Those are the sort of little stories that I will tell because I'm kind of telling them on myself. And then it's okay because I'm the only one that should really be offended, and I'm not offended. So with the choosing of jokes, I'm real careful on that sort of thing. And I think that's a gender choice also. As a lady, I'm very careful of that sort of thing. As far as the showmanship aspect goes for me, one of the first things that I chose to do was to change my style of dress from the traditional square dance clothes to, I'll step over here for a second, this is one of the outfits that I wear when I call a dance. When I teach classes or I teach workshops, I wear traditional square dance attire. Also, if we go dancing, I do. But when I'm calling a dance or a festival, I dress this way because I wanted to stand out. Even if I was on the floor talking with the dancers, it was break time, I wanted to stand out, which is probably why I picked up the microphone in the first place. So that was a choice that I made. It's worked very well for me. I don't know how many of you do this at your dances, but I also like to start off the dance by having the dancers turn to your corner and say whatever. That to me kind of is a good way to set the mood. Now, some of the things I have made up myself. Other things I've heard another caller say, and I thought, oh yeah, I could get away with that. But I have to deliver it in my own style. Such as, there's a little poem that I heard another caller use, and I thought it was very cute, but he said it very quickly. And I took that same poem, I like to use it at all beginner dances, and I slow it down and make the dancers repeat the poem after me. And that's beginning of a beginner dance. The dancers are a little bit nervous, and they're not quite sure. Maybe the first time they've ever danced, number one, to a different caller, and number two, to a woman. So I say, now we're going to start this dance off with the right attitude. Everybody turn and face your corner and take your hands in your hands and repeat after me. Roses are red. Violets are blue. If I mess up, I'm blaming you. And that just kind of relaxes everybody. It's okay. I've got a scapegoat now in the square that I can use if I'm not where I belong. So it starts the dance off with a little bit of a giggle and a happy feel. I prefer to use a good variety of tools in the structuring of my dance because I like to be thought of as being versatile, as being able to call choreography, as being able to deliver a good singing call. And I've worked very, very hard on this. A lot of it has been the quote-unquote research. I have no pride at all about going out there and taking what somebody else uses or is doing and turning around and doing it myself. No pride at all. However, I learned the hard way that I have to do it my way. I have to make it my own. Frank and I had gone to a dance that when Flip comes into California, if we can possibly be there, we are there. And he did this wonderful little choreographic thing that it was just so slick. And I thought, all right. So I went out to my next dance, and the dancers did it, and they were just screaming and hollering, having a good time. I went out there and did it, and they all just looked at me like, right. They wouldn't do it to save their souls. No way. Because somehow they knew that it really wasn't mine. And when I took that same little piece of choreography and just changed the cue words, gave them an extra beat of time, then they did it. But it had to be mine. I had to own it. And so for that, I've learned that the hard way, that if I do hear an idea or a choreographic gimmick or something like that, I can use it, but I can't use it exactly the same way. Because then I'm not being me. And boy, can the dancers smell a phony 10 miles away upwind. So everything that's done like that, I do try to do myself. I like to use opening biggies maybe once or twice a night. You don't want to beat the dancers to death with them. You all are aware of that. And same with surprise get-outs. I enjoy using those also, where their corner just comes out of nowhere. Or, pardon me, or to have them think that perhaps I'm not really quite sure where I'm going with this particular thing, and I will let the, oh gosh, now what have I done? Let me try this. No, wait a minute. And all of a sudden, boom, there's their corner out of nowhere. And that is a showmanship tool that I use to where they're beginning to wonder, is she really going to get us where we belong? But I don't drag it on too long, because then the surprise element is more powerful at that point in time. I wanted to focus a little bit on the some of the music, some of the musical tools that I use, because if you're really doing your job during the patter part as a quote-unquote showman, you're really, the dancer's attention should be on their own square and the dynamics of what's happening within that square. Their attention should not really be on the stage where you are. You're more guiding them into entertaining themselves, if that makes any sense. But when you hit the singing calls, the choreography becomes a little more simplistic in most cases. The sequences are obviously shorter. And you have a chance to kind of say, notice me, notice me. And so that's where I like to use a different variety of music. And every piece of music in my case, every record, means something to me. It's a personal choice of mine. There's a part of me in that plastic. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in my case. So a lot of times I like to set it up by explaining something, some little thing about why maybe I've picked this particular piece of music. For example, I'll tell them, okay, we're going to do a little light opera this time. Do you know how to dance to you know how to dance to the opera? Right, we all must assume the correct posture. We're very straight backed, chins lifted just a little bit, nose in the air. And so they're wondering, what in the world are we going to dance to that's operatic? Because opera appeals to probably a larger portion of the population than I'm aware of, but a rather small portion of the square dance population is really turned on by opera. So this is something that's a little bit different. And then, and this I took from another caller shamelessly, and I'll say, okay, now, if you're asked to weave the ring, you don't hoot and holler. You just barely clap your hands. We're being very, very cultured here. And when the singing call is over and we're all done, you all stand there and yell, "Brava! Brava!" And you throw flowers and money. Usually it's coin. I've never had the folding stuff come floating up on stage. But I did have a lady rip the flowers out of her hair and toss them up one time. Still have that, as a matter of fact. So this is the song. If I could get a little bit of volume here. Side space, grand square, some enchanted evening. You may see a stranger. You may see a stranger across a crowded room. Four ladies chained with dignity and grace. Chain them back and promenade. The sound of his laughter will ring in your dreams. Head square through to a very snobby dosado. Swing through, boys run a new Ferris wheel. Double pass through and track two. That corner swing, promenade. Somewhere you'll see him again and again. You get the idea. You get the idea. Bravo! 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 It works every time. It's wonderful. You know, applaud for me, applaud for me. I've already told him to. So it works out terrific. Now here's a little gimmick that I picked up from Jack Murtha, watching absolute master at work at a one-night stand type of a party. And I went, I can do that. So I went back, and I will use this particular record, and what a response it gets. One of the things that we do in our area of the country is we rotate the square 1/4 between the patter and the singing call. And I like to do that. I like to engineer those rotates. That's kind of a gimmick of mine, is I will always be the one to rotate the square. I never finish and say, now rotate. If I'm in an area where they don't do that, I will try to use a return to home that's a little bit different. And if I'm very fortunate, I get it to end on the last boom of the patter record. That's so effective. Doesn't always happen, but I try. So after we've rotated the squares, I will ask them, and I had to learn to change this, ladies and gentlemen. I used to ask, who's the number one lady in the square? Well, after a couple of cat fights, I decided maybe I'd better say, who's the lady in the number one spot? That worked a little bit better. So because they don't know, they've rotated, they've forgotten. So lady number 1, raise your hand. Lady number 2, number 3, number 4? Okay. Because it's very important that you know who you are. Well, already they know she's up to something again. Something's going on up here. So this particular singing call is an old rock and roll tune. It's kind of fun. It's a chaparral. Just lady number 1, promenade inside. Now lady number 2, get in there and strut around a little bit. Lady number 3, get in there and boogie. Lady number 4, get in there and get down. Allemande lift your corner, you swing your own around and promenade or two. Well, a splish splash, I jump back in the bath, 'cause how was I to know there was a party going on? Now, I continue that through the middle break. Lady number 1, first of all, they're looking around like, what, I'm supposed to get in there all alone? Then they begin to get into it, and the guys are hooting and hollering as the guys are cheering. They get a chance to get in there all by themselves and just kind of strut around, show off a little bit. Well, of course, the middle break is the same, but the ending, I will ask the number 1 man to get in there all by himself. I don't know what it is about men promenading. It sends people into a frenzy, but it does. So, number 1 guy's in there all by himself. And he's strutting around. Number 2 guy, he's going to get in there and show number 1 guy. Number 3 guy gets in there, I'll tell number 3 man, get in there and be a hero. They strut around. Number 4 guy, get in there and do the twist. And they jump in there to promenade, and man, they're just getting into it. It's a lot of fun because it gives them a chance. I'm engineering them to show off for each other. And that's always kind of fun, too. I get a real good response from this. I really enjoyed what you had to say, Tim, about that controlled response, because this is definitely a biggie. Let's see, what's another one? This one. This song, I did for years, got good response on it, a lot of requests for it, that sort of thing. Well, at Salt Lake this last year, I heard this music with a different song, a little bit different slant, if you will, and lights went on. Bingo, bingo, bingo. I can use that. I can use that. Well, I couldn't find the song in any store. I couldn't remember the whole thing. I could just remember a little bit. So I kind of had to write the rest of it myself. And I tell the dancers that you've heard me do this song, but I've kind of changed the words, so it's probably going to tell a little bit different story than what you're anticipating. All right, they're listening now. See, this is going to be a little bit different. This isn't just a singing call. This is something a little bit different. And I'm giving you guys free of charge here one of my big gimmicks. I had 5 requests at the dance I did on Saturday night to do this ridiculous thing. Circle to the left. Oh, Farmer Brown went out to gather eggs for him to fry, when all at once a rotten egg hit him in the eye. Walk around your corner, girl, seesaw your own. Do an Allemande left, weave the ring you roam. E-B-I-O, swing your own promenader home. Ghost chickens in the sky. So then you have, verse 1 and verse 2. Let's see if I can catch the middle break here. I might have gone too far. I'm not real good at picking that kind of stuff out. Nope. Those of you that have the tape, just fast forward it till I get to that spot. I think the middle break's coming up right now, I hope. Circle to the left. Their beaks were still on fire and their eyes were bloody red. They didn't have no feathers, 'cause these chickens were dead. Walk around your corner, girl, seesaw your own. Do an element left, weave the ring you roam. Yippee-yi-oh, swing your own promenader home. Ghost chickens in the sky. Now, ending verse. Hopefully I'll be able to find it here. I wish they'd have like lines on the record there so you could, it's like, here's 1, 2, 3, 4. I really can't tell. Okay, thank you, husband. All right. Circle to the left. The chickens flopped on by him. He heard one say, "Hey, you, if you don't change your ways, we'll send the colonel to fry you. Walk around your corner, girl, seesaw your own. Do an element left, weave the ring you roam." Swing and promenade. Now, where else are you going to have requests for you to cluck like a chicken, right? Except in square dancing. So that is a wonderful tool, but that's so I heard, I can do that. So I'm always on the lookout for things that I can take and turn around and make uniquely mine. Now, sometimes we're fortunate enough to have beautiful pieces of music that we can use on a night when perhaps we're not feeling too good, or the voice is kind of and we really shouldn't be there. But of course we know the entire square dance world will come to a screeching halt if we aren't. So we go anyway. And that's the time to use, I think, a little piece of music like this. This is on Shakedown. And this piece of music is a swing type of thing. I will usually say something like, I don't think Duke Ellington in his wildest dreams ever thought people would be square dancing to this. Well, Duke Ellington's name carries a lot of weight. People are listening. Wonder what that piece of music is going to be. Four ladies promenade one time around that ring. Get back and swing that handsome man. I got a showing hands, circle to the left. Walking around that set. Left element and weave that ring. Stomp on her toes and promenade, and it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Do-up, 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 do, wow. And now the head's square through a little clarinet here. And around a lift through, you get the idea. This piece of music has got some beautiful instrumentation that I don't have to sing over. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not doing my job as a showman, but I'm allowing this piece of music that I paid good money for to be able to show off too. And that's especially comforting to have that kind of stuff in your case when it's a night when you really would like to back off and not have to sing everything that you do. Gosh, let's see. I'll do this one for Frank. I am one of those obnoxious, holier-than-thou ex-smokers. Okay? If you smoke, you don't want to be around me. I'm absolutely obnoxious about it. So, and I said that one time at a dance. I was setting up this record by saying, I used to be a smoker. And some guy I don't know where this man's head was, but he thought I said, I used to be a hooker. This guy was like, I mean, if I stopped short, he was running into me. He was following me around all night long. Finally, at the end of the night, he told me what he thought I said. Yeesh. So...
You didn't go to the University of Mississippi, did you?
Southern California, born, bred, and raised. Anyway, this is one of Frank's favorite songs because of the fact, I will set it up for Frank, that at the end of this song, there's a powerful note there, and it used to be kind of iffy if I was going to be able to hit it or not. And now that I don't smoke anymore, I don't have to worry about that. So, let's see. Once again, I have to find the end of the song here. Help me. Yeah, I want the closer. Okay. That was it? Turn through Alabama left, we by the ring, turn and go, walk out that door now. So when you're on and then you promenade her home, I've got all my life to live, and all my love to give, and I'll survive. I will survive. I will survive. Now that's definitely a notice me piece, you know. That's definitely a notice me.
All right, let's all practice that note together now.
So there's a lot of different tools that you can use with your music where you can show off in a particular way. That's something where I want you to hear me sing. I paid a lot of dues to get the voice that I have, and I like to show it off. But there's other times when I'm going to do myself better if I back off and let the music do it a little bit. So, please don't misunderstand me, folks. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. All I'm doing is trying to share you, this works for me. And if there's something here that you can take and you can use, it's yours. But be yourself. Because if you go out there and you try to be, what are you doing? You want the words to the chicken song? Buy the tape. Anyway, just make sure that it's you that you're selling, because each and every one of you is so different and so unique and so special that I know you can look inside of yourselves and find those things and be able to hone that particular tool that you would like to use and shine at. The best advice, if I can give any advice, is to be comfortable with what it is that you're doing. If you feel that perhaps you're a little bit shaky on some of your choreography, you're a little bit shaky on some of your singing calls, practice those, work on those. Because if you're confident about what you're doing, if you feel good about what you're doing, then you can get out of your own way, which is where I am most of the time, is in my own way. Get out of your own way and let that part of you shine through. And the show that comes off will be uniquely, the Tim show, the Deborah show, the Darryl show, and it won't just be a generic type of a thing. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for something very individualistic. And I know you all have it, and if something that I've said or done or that Tim has said or done you can use, by all means jump on it, go for it, and the best of everything to you, and thank you for listening.
Deborah Parnell. In any type presentation, everybody will tell you right quick, never follow children or beautiful women. Now look what I've got to do. I got one of each up here. Okay. I'm fascinated, quite honestly. We've talked briefly, very briefly over the phone, and I'm fascinated at how a lot of the things they're saying tie in with what I had wanted to say and planned to say. I thought both were tremendous presentations. I hope you all got something out of it. I sort of wanted to talk about enthusiasm, and I'm going to, and I'll get up to that in a minute, but before I can get to enthusiasm, I have to back up a little bit and talk about preparation for enthusiasm. Sort of what I mean is, if you get on stage, if you're just called upon, if I just pick somebody out of the floor right now, I says, get up here and do such and such. All right, you might do that. And if it just didn't happen to hit on something you do all the time, you may have a little trouble. You might get up here and you might stammer around and stutter around like I'm doing right now, and it might be a problem. You may have enthusiasm for the topic or what you care about, the square dancing, the calling, but it just may not come through because of your lack of preparation. Your lack of preparation. So before you can, I think you can use enthusiasm and this type of thing for your showmanship. You have to be prepared to do so. Now, a lot of the notes that I have here, I use for a caller's seminar that I do quite often for beginning callers, but it still everything in it applies to each one of us. And I noticed that both of these people just said, right toward the end of their talks, Tim said, you get back and look at yourself. Get back and look at yourself. And Deborah says, get out of your own way and let your showmanship come through. And that's what I think we really should all do, is stand back and take a real close, critical look at ourselves. We as square dance callers all, I think, have a tremendous ego. You know that. But I think one thing that keeps each of us from learning more and being able to present a better presentations is perhaps we think we're good. We might think, I'm doing this real well. And you may be. But we may not be doing it near as well as we could if we would look at ourselves very objectively and see what we could do to improve. So with that in mind, I'm suggesting that first of all, you have a real positive attitude about what you're going to do, and you say, I am going to be better. I'm going to make my presentation. I'm not going to do the same thing I did last week. And there's just so many things I can tell you to do like that. Some of you listen to it, some of you won't, but I like to address our talking to mostly what I call club callers, or the backbone of the activity, not necessarily the traveling callers or the so-called professional callers, but the people that call for that little club of 2 or 3 squares every week, once a week, and they teach classes. That's the people I like to address my remarks to. How many of you folks here teach classes? How many of you call for local clubs? You're the backbone of the entire activity, and we appreciate you folks doing that. I do too. I teach classes, and I call for local clubs. In making your presentation to your local clubs, how many of you keep a journal of what you do every week? How many of you can look back and see? Look, there's a real good number. I think that's excellent. I don't do that. I really should, but I sort of remember what it is, I think, or try to. But that's not always good enough either. For your local clubs and everything, to present a good program, I'm suggesting you do that. Try keeping your journal of what you did, and then make you a plan of what you're going to do next week, and work toward that. There's nothing at all wrong with doing exactly what Deborah just said, and that is taking this material this wonderful material she just gave you, and use some of that. But I'm looking around, and I see a couple of just 1 or 2 bald heads, a couple of mustaches and all that. You're going to have trouble doing the Deborah show. Okay? But anything that you can use that she put out there, that would be great to add to your program. But I'm reiterating what she said. Make it your program, not somebody else's program. Don't try to emulate somebody exactly, but make it your program. There are so many things involved with showmanship, and I was pleased right at the very first year. I'd like to give you a couple of little examples. I went to a concert one night in Tallahassee, Florida. Big deal, great big building, 5 or 6 times this size, that kind of thing, and paid big money to get into the show. The show was to start at 8 o'clock, and the show started at 9:30. And perhaps it has to do with my age, but I was mad before the show ever started. And when the performer came out, they said, they didn't make an apology for being late. They said, I had to warm up. And I sure wish I could have got a microphone and said, why didn't you start warming up an hour and a half earlier? I was mad before the thing ever started. So part of showmanship is right off the bat. You can't see it, there's a little clock right up here. We started talking today at 10:45, according to this clock right here. And I was also very pleased with what Tim did. He didn't stand back here like this, and he didn't come up here and say, well, we're going to talk about showmanship this morning. He got this mic, and he got it right out in front, right close to everybody, and he made contact with everybody. That's extremely important. All these things are part of your program, and they're part of showmanship. Start on time. Dress right. Have your program prepared. Know exactly what you're going to do, or, as close as you can to exactly what you're going to do. Start it on time, and get out there and be part of your people. I've seen a bunch of callers, and I'll bet you have too. Quite often you'll come to some kind of a setup where the table is beside you, table is behind you, or something like that. I've seen many callers call an entire tip while they're fooling with their records right here, or they may be looking at some notes back here. Okay, well, if I spent an hour just like this right here, what are you going to think about it? You're going to enjoy watching my back while I'm planning my program. So it's very important you get right out here and you contact with these people. You contact with your eyes with these people. You are a part of what they're doing. That's part of your showmanship. That is part of your show. You're making them part of your show by you getting right out here next to them and talking to them. That's part of your enthusiasm for the activity and what you're doing. I'm sort of jumping around all over the place, but these things run together so much for me. That's I have trouble separating them. How do you practice? How do you folks practice? I mean, you don't have to respond to that, but I'm asking you to do what Tim did. I'm asking you to look at yourself. How do you practice? How much do you practice? What do you practice? If you do what Tim said and you find somebody that will tell you the truth about it, or you take a tape and listen to yourself, you should be able to learn some of the things you need to practice on, and then of course those people are going to tell you some of the things you need to practice on, and that's good. And what I'd like to do at this point is ask you to ask us some questions. What would you give us some questions about showmanship or presenting your program to your people? Just ask anything you'd like for any of us. Somebody ask me some questions. Oh boy. Yes, sir. Jim, thank you. Jim Wheeler. Repeat the question.
He wants to know how much of my program actually, because I tend to be a little off the cuff and a little spontaneous. He would like to know what portion of it is spontaneity. Is that a word? Spontaneous.
You need a little time to plan that answer, right?
Yeah. Honestly, I must tell you that everything that I call, every record that I pick up, and everything that I use, and that includes with duets when you work with another caller, and I have worked with you before, and you're right, it was a frightening experience. But I would say every time I pick up a record and I call, it's 100% planned. I already am pretty sure, or I've already gone through the things that are humorous or the things that I know I can hit the high note or not hit the high note. So those things I'm sure of. The things that happen before and right after, those are completely spontaneous. And that usually is because I am fortunate in that growing up in the square dance activity, I've really learned how to interact with people. And if they say something to me, I can say something back, because we've already got that dancer-caller relationship happening. I mean, just like what Darryl said, I stood at the front of the stage because I wanted to talk to you. And when I call, I never have a table in front of me. And that's quite something that happens quite frequently at the higher levels. Challenge, quite frequently, they'll put the table in front, and that's a utility thing that they use because of cards. And I'll tell you, that is the most uncomfortable thing for me, because I can't get to the people. I just feel like that's the barrier right there. I just can't get to the people. And so I can't have that dancer-caller relationship going. And I think that, but when I'm calling, it's all planned. I've already been there. I've already done that. And I already know what's going to happen, except when I call with you. Is that okay?
All right. Another question, please. Anybody?
Can I add one little thing to what you said?
Sure, go right ahead.
The idea that the whole thing appears spontaneous is the mark of a true showman. Because even though their program may be planned down to the nth degree, the fact that they are able to get up there and present it as though it is brand new is the mark of a true showman.
Yeah, actually, one of the tools. This is really good. This is developing nicely. One of the tools that I mentioned is something called compensation. And I just was thinking about this. Compensation doesn't mean remuneration. Doesn't mean you get paid for calling. Compensation means the ability to change your program, or the ability to interact with the people that way. And I think that is very, very important. And that's not something that we can all do. And sometimes it's better not to say anything than say something at all. But thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
When you go out and you have a small dance, you keep your enthusiasm as well as if you have 30 squares, if you have 4 squares.
Very
Personally,
good.
I agree. I do, yeah.
Yes, let's repeat the question. I'm going to repeat the question for the tape. The gentleman said if you go out and call a small dance, 3 or 4 squares, can you keep the same enthusiasm and all that you do for 30, 35 squares or a large crowd? Deborah.
I would prefer 4 squares of enthusiastic dancers to 40 squares from the Wax Museum. If
I have seen callers go out expecting a full house, coming up with 4.
and they're disappointed and it shows.
The same caller will go 3 days later and call a super dance to a full house.
Well, a big crowd and the big crowd, that dance to me calls itself. If you have a big crowd and they're enthusiastic, that dance calls itself. When you have the harder dance to call is the 3 or 4 squares, and those people deserve as much of you as you would give to a larger crowd, my own personal opinion. But there are also different ways to make that dance enthusiastic. How much screaming and hollering is going to really echo? I mean, it's going to be like BBs in a boxcar. You know, the sound is evaporated if you just have 4 squares. But there's other ways to bring that crowd together, get them laughing, have a good time, and feel like we may be small, but we're feisty, man. We are mighty. We are really going to have a good time tonight. And there's almost a different feel, a feeling of intimacy that the caller can create with those people, as though perhaps they're just dancing in the garage, and we're having a ball. But I think that the dancers deserve that. Those people that showed up should never be punished for the people who did not show up.
I'd like to mention, of course, all of us, I think all of us, there's a natural feeling there if you have a large crowd. Really, if you look back and think about it, I think the more people that come to your dance, that sort of means the more people that enjoy what you do and they accept you and they're promoting you or they enjoy your dance. So it's sort of a natural feeling of warmness and enthusiasm when you do have a good crowd. But when I call a dance, I don't care what size it is. When I call a dance, my goal as a caller is to do something a little bit different. But here's the key sentence now coming up. But everybody get through it. Okay, I don't want to do anything different. It's going to break a bunch of people down. Of course, we get carried away. And when I get calling, and just had this happen quite recently, calling for a large crowd, all of us we're going to lose a certain amount of people for whatever reason. I'm talking about break the squares down. And I really enjoy a small group as far as the calling and the dancing is concerned, because you can watch, you have those 4 or 5 squares, you can see everybody when they start to have a problem, and you can compensate for that, where if you're calling for 30 or 40 squares, you're going to may break down 3 or 4 or 5 squares or even more, and not notice it as much as you would with the 4 or 5 little squares right in front of you. So I really work at the enthusiasm, keeping it up, and I think I can have a better time with the choreography with a small crowd than I can with a large crowd as an individual. So that's what I work on, and of course we all know, without saying, there's a fine line there where you can do enough and then do too much different stuff. I'm talking about the choreography. So I try my best to watch that, but try to present a good program for that small crowd. They're just as important as a big crowd. Do you have something, Tim?
Just a comment that somebody said to me. I was having trouble with this smaller club, I'll be honest with you. And I'll be honest right here that I love 40 squares, 50 squares. I love it. I like it a lot better than I like 2 or 3 squares. I like it differently, maybe not a lot better, but I love 40 squares, 50 squares, but I was having a real tough time dealing with that, I'll be honest with you. I asked the guy who taught me to call, how do I keep this enthusiasm up? Not really the dancers, but how do I keep my enthusiasm up? How do I keep myself going? And then it'll feed through to the dancers. And he couldn't help me, and I wrote, I think, what I, at that time, believed to be the greatest entertainer, square dance caller I had ever seen, and that was Mr. Jerry Schatzer. And he wrote me back a letter, and it was like a paragraph that said, if one person went out of their way to come to a dance, you should be incredibly flattered. And that's all it ever took for me to get over that hump. If only one person went out of the way to come to a dance where I was calling, I'm honored. I really was. So I owe it to them to do the best possible job I can. But I did have trouble. And I still like 40 squares.
I like that. Don't we all like 40 squares? No, right in the very back. Yes, ma'am. Give me a yell, will you? Young lady, it says, between tips, do you work the crowd or do you sort of be standoffish? Go ahead. You do it. I'll come right behind you.
I call it, Frank and I'll say, well, I need to go shake babies and kiss hands.
Wait a minute. Wait, what?
And that means that I need to get down off of that stage. It's very tempting to stay up there and put my records back in alphabetical order where I like them to be and make sure that my stuff, and get my water and get my, but that's not why I'm there, you know, and so, yes, I do. I try to make sure that I get, a lot of times I end up shaking people's hands twice, because I'll start on one side of the room, and when I get over to the other side of the room, all these people have come over to the other side, and so I hit some people twice. But there's always going to be somebody that I miss, as hard as I do try. So, yes, I do try to get down and see everybody, and especially because of the way our system is set up in Southern California, where I may call for a club once or twice a year. So when I get in there, I want those people to know I'm happy to be back.
That's definitely part of showmanship. And I'll tell you something that I think is important. I'm going to give you two examples. One is your local club. If you can shake hands with every man that comes in the door, and you know, some of the areas don't do this. We sort of hug the girls in a very nice way in our area. That's very, very important. It's important to every one of your dancers, and it's important that you do it every week. And then at large dances, what I try to do is get there early, and I try to stand as close to the front door as I can without blocking the door, and I really try to greet every person that comes in the dance. I do the same thing Deborah says, but quite often, like if you got a large room, you go down one side, you know, and people normally sit in the same place. You go down one side, and then maybe it's time to go back and call, and next time you try to go down the other side, and you go back and call, but some people are up round dancing. Some like you're going to miss some people, and that's okay too, and it's okay to shake hands with them twice, but try to stand toward that front door and greet everybody that comes in. That's just as important as some of the songs you use and the choreography you use and all that. I promise you it is. That warm personal feeling is just as important as your program in many instances. Tim, you have something?
Just that I agree.
Good statement. Good statement. Yes, sir.
I've recently started working with a wireless microphone, and will actually go off the stage among the dancers. And the reaction is different. Have either of you tried that, and what's been your reaction from the dancers?
Gentleman said he worked with a wireless microphone. He gets off the stage and works with the dancers while you're calling. Am I correct? Have we used that? Have we used that type thing? For an individual, I have done that, and it's a surprise element for your dancers. It's a cute little gimmick for your dancers, but I'll tell you what's I think is fun, and your dancers would love it. I happened to be calling an A2 dance one time, and we lacked one gentleman had enough to fill an exact number of squares, and I had a cue rounds. I had a wireless mic, and I put the wireless mic on and got out and danced the number one man's position and call at the same time. Now that's fun for everybody. That's challenging. But you can tell how smooth you are. I promise you can. Did anybody else want to answer that? Yes, sir.
I tried that once, Darryl, and I said head square through, and I noticed my square wasn't moving. All of a sudden, I noticed that, oh hell, I'm ahead.
Man, didn't hear your own commands, huh? Okay. Deborah.
Well, I also have a wireless mic that I set up from time to time, and I have never used it during the patter. I use it during a particular singing call where I like the dancers to sing along, and I usually will use the singing call, Kiss Me Once, Kiss Me Twice, Kiss Me Once Again. It's been a long, long time. One of the ways that I get them singing along, and then I guess this I shamelessly swipe from Flippo. He'll put a singing call out, and if he's asking people to sing along, when it gets to the part where they're supposed to sing along, he'll turn the music off. And it startles them. First of all, they think, he stumbled over the plug, or they think I have anyway, and that the sound's been cut off. Well, then they begin to realize that I'm really going to be listening and watching to see if they're singing along. Once I've gotten them to that point, then I will leave the stage, and I will go down amongst the dancers, and when it comes time to sing, I will put the microphone in front of I'll sneak in with a couple that's promenading and put it in front of somebody's mouth and let them sing it. And it's very interesting. Some people should actually just lip sync, but it is, and some people are just singing along till they see that microphone come, and then all of a sudden they just shut up, and there's nothing there. So it's a lot of fun. I do use it.
I've only done it once.
Tim says, I agree.
I agree.
Anybody else? Deborah mentioned Flip. I'll tell you a couple of things. Every year at this thing, is Flippo in here? Where is Flip? He Flip's here too. Everybody knows Marshall Flippo, or should know Marshall Flippo. If you don't, you need to do a little research and find out who Marshall Flippo is. But I'll tell you a couple of gimmicks that I stole from Flip. He just does a super job. Everybody's all squared up. music's playing, Flip gets up there and he says, "Square through." Everybody looks and everybody starts to go. Nobody goes. They look, they wait. And then he says, "Heads." Another thing I saw, and you can use this. This would come under gimmicks. It's part of your showmanship. This comes under gimmicks, and we all know, you've heard it many times. Don't use too many gimmicks. Don't base your entire program on gimmicks. Use one where it's effective, but not the entire show. I heard somebody say this one time, and they just says circle clockwise. And it is. Maybe the dancers don't enjoy it, but I have a ball watching them.
Hysterical. Absolutely hysterical.
But I got to where I would lead up to that a little bit different. In a singing call, during the middle break, I'll have the 4 ladies to the center, just the 4 ladies to the center, circle to the left. 1 full turn, back out and square your set. 4 gentlemen to the center, and to the right you circle. They go 1 time, back out and square your set. Now the guys have gone one way and the girls going the other way, and when they get squared up again, then I say join hands and circle clockwise. And for 16 beats, they stand there and they do this. They go one. And then you Alamana left and promenade. So, go ahead.
Yes, I had seen this happened actually by accident, and this was something that Wade Driver had told us. We were working at a festival together, and it was a tremendous tool that we used. However, I used it one other time at a festival, and it can be overkill, all right? And this is what he did for the duration of about a day and a half here. Let's see, turn this up. Just kidding. Over and over and over again. So about every other tip, and dancers love that record. They hear that car start and just kidding. So, and it actually had been an accident. Evidently, I guess if I'm probably telling the story incorrectly, but anyway, I believe it was a round dance cue who had picked up the record by mistake and put it on thinking it was his round dance record, and that car started. Oh, sorry, and Wade, a light went on. Okay, he's got himself a gimmick. So that's the sort of thing where you say take something and make it uniquely your own.
Great.
So I guess you want to hear a cute little thing of mine that I do too.
I thought you were going to say I agree. Yeah.
I'm not telling. No, actually, one thing that I do that's cute is going with the 4 men and 4 girls and things. I have the 4 men, 4 girls do a flutter wheel, 4 men do a flutter wheel. That's hard enough as it is. And then I'll have the 4 ladies do a 2 ladies chain. Then I'll have the 4 men do a 2 ladies chain. It's a lot of fun. It's not quite as funny as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Anything you can use like that to let the people have a good time without making them feel like you're putting them down, I think is good. Other question, anybody?
I got a question for Deb. She steals a lot of stuff from Marshall Flippo. You get out on the floor and kiss all the guys, but Marshall kisses every woman in the hall.
No.
Marshall Flippo is the only man I know that's had his lips recapped twice. Anybody else have anything to say? It's 6 minutes to 12 o'clock. Yes, sir.
One thing on Jennings. I'm just a friend.
That's okay.
One thing on Jennings. I was with Dan 2-3 years ago. This caller got me squared and I'm helping him. This is a club of older people. He stopped the music. Said, I just want to tell you all, you look like hell. The whole floor just went quiet. There are people still on dance that came to call that.
Okay. Was that it? Gentleman states that a caller got a group of dancers in an L formation and then told them that they looked like L, and everybody got extremely quiet.
Yeah, it was almost an insult to a lot of those people.
Sure. Now, I think it's judgment call, but if it gets close to a judgment call and you think it might offend somebody, of course, obviously, I would say the person did not think it would offend anybody. Thought it was cute, perhaps. But we all know that you don't offend anybody if you can possibly help it. Don't even do anything that gets close to it. If there's a question, you leave it alone. Any other? One more comment. Yes, sir.
Deborah, what's the number of the record that don't mean
Let's see. That's Shakedown. Of course, it's probably on the bottom of the pile.
We have a question about a number of a record.
The number of the record is called If It Ain't Got That Swing. And it looks like SD202B, as in boy. Yeah, SD202. Okay.
Anybody else? Last one.
Everybody don't steal Deborah's idea about changing clothes because you won't look that good in that dress.
That's right. Most of you guys won't look that good in that dress. Do y'all have another time? We thank you very much for coming in this morning. Do appreciate it. Lunch is at 12:15.